This is the Dollemore Daily.
Hello and welcome to the Dollemore Daily. We're the Banks sisters, still filling in for Jesse as he's settling into Washington, D.C. I'm Courtney.
I'm Keisha, and today I think we should start by talking about the pandemic response in schools. We have a clip here from The Takeaway on NPR. Let's give it a listen.
We begin by asking, is school safe? Now, it's a question we ask in the aftermath of deadly school shootings. It's a question we asked throughout much of 2020 as schools, teachers, and caregivers tried to teach while battling a global pandemic of a deadly disease for which we had no cure and no vaccine. But last year brought hope for so many as safe, effective, free vaccines became available. First for the teachers, then for the middle and high schools, and finally last year for the youngest elementary school kids. Now, most of us thought we were going to be entering 2022 with students in seats and teachers in classrooms. But when the highly contagious Omicron variant exploded into American towns and cities, sending infection rates to record heights, it changed everything. And here's what some of you told us about the disruption you're living with at this moment.
Marissa, Staten Island, New York. It is a hot mess. Our school district is open. The new New York City mayor is adamantly opposed to shutting it down. And my kid's been in school 4 days and already has his third exposure since school started.
Hi, this is Kira from St. John's, Florida. Yes, our school is in person, and there are no safety protocols for COVID right now. Masks are completely optional. There's no vaccine requirements. There's no social distancing as our schools are too overcrowded.
My children go to Byron, Minnesota schools. They are not mandated to wear masks. It's hard to ask your children to wear masks when other kids aren't expected to wear masks.
Hi there, this is Bonnie, Parker, Colorado. And unfortunately, the school district I am a teacher in has pretty much no protections for us from COVID. Masking is not required. As long as students test negative, even if they've been directly exposed, they are allowed to come into school.
Hi, this is Lisa from St. Louis. I'm a sixth grade teacher in a large school district in St. Louis, and we 20% of our teachers at least are out right now. Bus drivers all called out today. I foresee some virtual action in our future.
We're always so grateful to those of you who call in and share with us your stories.
Wow. A lot to unpack there, I think, from that clip. And we'll share a little bit more from that podcast a little later. But I think the first place that we want to touch down on is the kids. I mean, school is for children to learn. Mm-hmm. We do not have kids, okay? That was y'all's mistake. But just kidding. All right, everybody calm down, okay?
It's a lifestyle choice. It's a lifestyle choice, okay.
But, you probably should have thought about the fact that your child would be the cog in the wheel of the machine and uses a political pawn in people's games to get money, possibly from pharmaceutical companies and other things. But listen, that's not what we're talking about.
So
we are, but I would say let's start with the children. In terms of, I feel like a lot of people frame this argument in terms of talking about what's best for the kids, right?
Mm-hmm, right.
So a lot of people are talking about how basically not just Omicron, but COVID in general has not been so susceptible. The kids are not so susceptible to it. They're not having these really adverse reactions to it. Mm-hmm. I do have a lot of reservations, I guess.
Questions.
In terms of that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how do they know? First of all, I feel like, COVID has only been around for such a short amount of time. If this were something like cancer or AIDS or something, then, the research is there, the years of research are there. But there isn't a ton of research about this. So like you were saying about the long-term effects or, you don't know what the ongoing effects are. I mean, we've heard of people with long-haul COVID. Does that happen for kids?
It's just absolutely
why would you want to subject your kid? Why would you want your kids to even have the opportunity of having this, especially if we don't have health insurance? But
but also when people talk about the time frame, what are we talking about when we're talking about long term? Because it's been, 2 years? This is going on the third year. See, there's no possible way that you could say that you know the long term effects of COVID on children or anyone else because we haven't had it long enough to know long term effects. So I do think that there are a lot of people kind of touting that kind of science in certain things that I've seen where I think it's a bit premature because there's just not enough time to possibly know that.
Right. And I mean, it's a tough situation to be in because of course kids want to go back to school. Of course they want to socialize. Like, you know, I mean, who doesn't? Of course everyone wants to get back to normal. But if you were to really think about what the long-term issues could be, then it's something to give you pause. And you have to weigh your options and think like, you know, if we could just completely shut down for a little while, like we did at the beginning.
I love that that's
help?
not even in the, no. That's not even it's not even a factor.
Option.
It's not even a conversation.
It's like, wouldn't it be better to just have your kid out of school for 2 months or something than to have them out of school for
2
like
weeks.
now 2 years now or
2
whatever?
weeks versus
right.
No, it makes absolutely no sense. And I also feel like a lot of my frustration is coming from the fact that now, all of a sudden, because we have a different administration, we're not allowed to say anything about Joe Biden. Joe Biden is completely absent. He's not following the science. A big part of this, talking about children, is people are talking about the fact that their learning loss, the social loss, but there are a lot of adverse reactions on the other ends in terms of suicide rates going up, and kids also do die in higher amounts in other things. But when you're looking at the reality of the situation, if you're only gonna argue about, kids need to be in school because it's good for them, but you're not talking about, but what's going on with the adults in the school as well, then you're not painting the whole picture.
Right.
So January 2021, this time last year, there was a big dispute around reopening negotiations. The mayor tried to reopen schools. The teachers voted, said, no, we're teaching remotely. She locked them out. It was a very similar situation to what's happening right now. And then of course, right now, Chicago doesn't have any type of classes, remote or in person. And back in 2012, the teachers went on their first strike in 25 years here in Chicago under Mayor Rahm Emanuel, and the situation just hasn't improved. At the time, the teachers union started negotiating common good bargaining, and so they started negotiating about these sort of wraparound issues, these support issues that affect students, affect working conditions, that have nothing to do with pay and benefits. This year and last year, it's about health and safety.
In a recent volley in this struggle, Chicago Tribune reporter Gregory Pratt tweeted on Sunday morning, quote, another small note from City Hall. As Mayor Lightfoot remains in a dispute with the CTU over CPS remote learning and reopening, her chief of staff quietly extended work from home for the mayor's office staff for at least another week. And Nader, I want to come to this point about the mayor's staff, working remotely. I'm a teacher during the parts of the day when I'm not on the radio. I'm a college professor. And I remember at the start of all of this, we were told, be ready to pivot at any moment, right? Not just in the next few weeks, but for the next several years. So I guess my big question is, why weren't the Chicago public schools ready to pivot if necessary? I don't think teachers are saying at this point they want to cancel this semester. They're talking about sort of waiting out the surge. Why isn't there kind of a process in place for exactly what we expected to happen with with this pandemic?
I've just heard a lot of kids that are saying they're going to school in person and then there's nobody to actually supervise them or to teach them. And so it ends up them being literally just waiting in a carousel in the auditorium, in, a homeroom, and they're stuck in there with 3 or 4 classes, never going to an actual class, never really learning anything, being more exposed to COVID. And it's like it's basically just being watched.
I mean, that's the problem, really. I mean, and I from the teacher end for sure, it seems like, and I can only imagine, but their concern is that they're being treated like babysitters. I mean, we have to have like some sense of reality of this. Like, I understand that it's hard for you to watch your child, but at the same time, public schools are not your child's babysitter. Right. Never have been or never should have been, I guess, anyways. But, you have to take some responsibility for like, this is not, again, it's like every time this happens, like we're not in a normal situation. Like we're not.
Okay, but even when you say take responsibility, that makes me like so irked. Just so irked. Because if Trump were in y'all would be saying, oh, this is absolutely not okay. The federal response is not stepping up because we need solutions. And we do need solutions. We need solutions at a federal level because what we're dealing with is it's not about people's personal responsibility. How are you supposed to choose between I have to help my kids set up and make sure they have Wi-Fi and all of these different things and make sure they're going to school. I also am working remotely and all these things. Or at this point, now you're being pushed back into the economy. Right. I have to go to work in an office where I'm more likely to be exposed to COVID. But I mean, there's no, obviously we wanted the Build Back Better bill to pass. And I think the fact that we don't have, at year 3 now, entering COVID, paid time off, sick time off for every job, doesn't matter what. We don't have it. So how are people you can't just have all of this piecemeal. It can't be all vaccine.
There's no comprehensive response. That's a huge part of the problem. I mean, if you look at what other countries have done to kind of mitigate this, it has to be not only the kids but also the economy because I mean, there are working mothers. There are people who have to take care of their own parents. I mean, their elderly parents. Right. There are just so many things, so many different moving parts and pieces that the only way that I think, I don't know. The only way that I think this can be done is you just have to shut down again for a little while, wait until things calm down. And if you have to do that every 6 months or 8 months or whatever, it is what it is. We're in a different situation now.
Listen.
You got to recreate it.
A lot of people are very pissed off and hesitant about the idea of shutting down. And rightfully so. This government Trump's administration basically was handing out PPP loans to closest friends, but it wasn't just him. Pelosi's family also got some. I mean, it was on both sides. So we were not actually protecting small businesses. And I mean, we went out in California, we went camping at that time, we went to some hot springs. And this was in the middle of, just the heat was up. It was right before the election between Biden and Trump. Mm-hmm. And we had to eat somewhere. And so we stopped at a diner and it had a Trump flag outside. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the only places, though, that was open. It was open. Everything in California was shut down. And they were like, we're open. So we went inside. And of course, when you go inside to eat at a restaurant, you have to just take your mask off. But at the end of, when you really looked at the situation, they're out there, on this highway, pretty much out there by themselves. Right. They have to be open in order to make a living. And when the government says they're going to give you assistance and they don't, you can't then force those people to shut down their livelihoods. Right. So when you do say shut down, I agree. I don't think that there's any other way that you can truly combat because it can't just be vaccines. It can't just be social distancing. It has to be masks. It has to be social distancing. But that's why it has to be air filtration. It has to be... You know what I mean? It's got to be all of these things working holistically. And if people were to... But also I do think, with a shutdown, I do actually think bars and restaurants could stay open. That's a little thing I have. I think schools and businesses, most people seem to be getting it at work. Yeah. And in an office situation and at school. Mm-hmm. I think that kids are carrying it from school asymptomatically and giving it to their adult counterparts. Right. Mm-hmm. But from restaurants and stuff, I think from what we've seen, also because you're probably, hopefully, not going to go out if you're sick. People, again, that used to be the norm. But I do think, we've got to have all of these working parts going at one time, and we're not mad enough at the leadership for not putting these pieces together. It needs a federal overreach. Yep. How can you have to have all these wraparound services. It's almost as if they think one thing doesn't affect the other. I mean, the way everything is so piecemeal, it's ridiculous. You have to have things that, and if it comes from a federal level, then it's much easier there was a girl on our YouTube comments today who said, who was just talking about how upset she was during the pandemic because she's a grocery store worker and everyone yells directly at her. And she's like, I work here part-time, bro. What is this? I don't know what you want me to do. Why not make it easier on a federal level so that everyone understands, everyone knows what's happening, and then it's easier for everyone to just get on one accord. I understand that people, don't want certain things for their children or want to have some sort of say over what goes on with their children, but,
then maybe you homeschool your kids. Well,
this is another thing. Okay, if you're a Democrat, this is something you might want to think about and maybe start getting mad about where your donation money has gone to. And you have every right to say that you're pissed off and that Joe Biden, with his 40 plus years of experience, is not leading the ship. You can say that. That is your right, especially if you donated money to this man.
Yeah.
Okay? But I would say just listen to what Keisha said there. To me, this sounds like a perfect setup, toss, whatever tennis analogy is for the Republicans and charter school. All Betsy DeVos wanted to do as Secretary of Education under Trump is to put more money into charter schools. And all we've seen from Republicans, look at the Virginia governor's race. It's about parental choice. So now we're talking about parental choice, not just with CRT, not just with books, but with masking.
But now with masking,
you know
now
I mean?
with vaccine mandates.
If there's no response, there's no way to rein that in, I feel like you're almost pushing parents to feel like their only choice is charter school. And then they're going to look at Republican candidates and say, you know what, I do want that choice because the public schools can't seem to get it together.
But why
is a failure.
Right. And why can't the public schools get it together? I mean, the public schools can't get it together because the government needs to work together and they need to... The government needs to get their shit together.
The thing that I can't understand is that a lot of money has been allocated to the schools, and I feel like when I first got in, I feel like a lot of things that people who come in to clean up somebody else's messes, you look and you see what's been put in place and what can we be working from that, right? What things do we need to clean up from that?
Right.
A bunch of money went out. I mean, rent, okay, the eviction moratorium. A lot of people were still having issues even getting the money.
Right.
The money was already voted on by Congress, which is way too hard to do. Why go and why not have that money used? Go and see what needs to be done federally to help get that money dispersed statewide. But the same thing seems to be happening with schools. The money was there for schools.
Right.
I haven't known of a bunch of air filtration systems changed or...
have not heard. You know what's interesting? I mean, if you think about all of these call-in things and different things we've been listening to, no one's mentioned that. No one's mentioned actual changes to the schools. Right. I mean, not to mention, another huge part of this was, I think, is workers' rights, which you were saying. I mean... What about the teachers?
What about the teachers? They are the ones who are the most susceptible. And without teachers, and not just teachers, but all of the moving parts of the school that take adults.
Right.
Janitors, you've got people working in the office, bus drivers, lunch ladies. It's a lot.
Yeah.
This is not, I mean, at the end of the day, you might have to say to your child, listen, tough shit, okay? There are other kids who grow up in war-torn countries, okay? And they're still trying to get to class. I'm very sorry that we're having to do remote learning for this 2 weeks while we make sure we can tamp this down. But it might be what it is.
Right. I mean, we're not in a war-torn Syria. I mean, we don't have kids, again, but we're just saying, let's look broader. I mean, it's one of those situations where, because we're in a pandemic, you have to look outside of yourself. It's not just about you. Everything is not just about what's going to make me comfortable.
And everything is not promised
Everyone's uncomfortable.
Everything is not everything was not comfortable. We moved back in with our parents. We were supposed to be living 30, flirty, and thriving in
LA and Hollywood. I mean, come on. We were walking to go out to bars. I mean...
Everybody's life has shifted. And I think that is a part of growing up, and that is a part of reality. And especially, I'm sorry, with climate change coming, let's just start being real with our children. And they're too smart for us not to.
Right.
Here I am talking like I have kids. But I'm just saying, they know. They're smart. They know. They know a lot more than you do and a lot more than you think. And I just think that it's an unprecedented time. And when we don't talk about teachers and we villainize them, what a weird thing to do as a parent, because you're a worker too.
Right. I mean,
do you not want rights? I don't understand.
Yeah, you have to think about it from the terms of, I mean, the teachers have been through a lot. Not only have they had to, first of all, we're already years into this now. So they've already had to adapt how they teach and learn how to teach on Zoom and all these different things. I mean,
not easier than teaching in person.
No, and think of all of the hoops that they've jumped through already at this point, just to get us to where we are. And now it's kind of like, I mean, from those stories, those call-in stories, like, oh, there are no mask regulations, kids can come to school even if as long as they just test negative, even if they've been exposed to someone. this is just, that's so unfair to them.
It just feels like
it's
being
so
spit
unfair.
on. It's just like, well, thanks for taking care of our kids.
Yeah, it feels like you're hiring babysitters.
I know you had to get a higher education, but screw you.
Like, why do you require all of these things of teachers? Why do they have to get their masters? Why do they have to get all these certificates and do all of these, like,
and
training hours and all of that? And, like, they don't get anything for it. And buying their own freaking crayons for school and stuff. And now you guys are just like, well, I
think you're being a little bit selfish.
So you gotta get them out of here. I mean, it's really, it's upsetting. I mean, I don't know I know a few people who are teachers, and they do it because they absolutely love it and could, like, not think to do anything else. Like, I mean, they're, like, into it. I mean, I know a guy who, like, freaking plays soccer in DC with his kids, like, on Saturdays and Sundays, and, like, I mean, he doesn't have to do all that. Like, he's just a teacher, you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's so interesting how we're always, it's just like the beginning of the pandemic when we're like, everyone's a hero, you know? And then here we are, and it's like, I don't care if you're a hero or not, I need to get things done, so we get back to work.
Yeah, it's a really messed up situation. I do think, if you're a parent and you are finding that you think the teachers are the ones being the pain in your side here, I think rethink it, give it a second thought and think about the kind of rights that you want at your own job, the kind of safety protection that you want at your own job. And I think, listen, we all just have to buckle down and make sacrifices during this period. And one of these might be, it needs to be a strict lockdown. And that needs to be demanded, I believe, by our federal government. And, let's just copy off of what we did before. It seemed to have worked to flatten the curve, and now it seems that the almighty dollar is speaking more than actual science, and that's really unfortunate.
Very unfortunate,
So, hate to see it, but let us know what you guys think about it. Once again, I've been Courtney. You can follow me on Twitter at Courtney Banks, at the Courtney Banks on Instagram.
I'm Big Keisha, and you can follow me at one of these Keishas on Twitter, briefly, not very often. Also, not very often on Instagram. More often, you can find us at Bank Sisters. We also have our YouTube channel there, and we have a podcast, which is called This Is Bullshit, and a fun podcast.
Called I Hope They Show Bravo in Hell, of course.
That's about Bravo, so much more relaxed. Do have a good day, everyone, and see you later.
Bye.